Hands where I can see them! The voice was sharp, cutting through the calm morning air. Two officers stepped out of a patrol car, badges glinting under the sunlight. The taller one, Officer Mark Harlan, pointed toward the woman leaning against her car. "You don't belong here. Step away from the vehicle." Elena Vasquez didn't flinch. She had parked legally, only minutes earlier, just to observe the patrol pattern she'd been sent to study. But before she could respond, the second officer, Derek Klein, gripped her arm and shoved her forward. Harlan pressed her against the hood, hard enough to make her shoulder crack against the metal. "You think you can just stand here and watch people's houses?" he barked. Elena said nothing. Her right hand, trembling slightly, rested against the steel. Sunlight bounced off her silver ring, the police academy emblem she'd worn for 20 years. Her phone buzzed inside her blazer pocket. The screen lit up with one name, Commissioner Hayes. She couldn't reach it. The handcuffs clamped tight, too tight. The metal bit through her wrists until she felt the warm sting of blood. "We're done talking," Harlan said, pushing her down to one knee on the hot pavement. His tone carried the casual arrogance of a man who believed no one was watching. Sergeant Lang's cruiser slowed as it passed. He looked, waved slightly, and drove away. The world stayed bright. Birds still sang, and for the first time in a long time, Elena didn't fight back. She was taking notes. Before going into this story, where are you watching from? Tell me in the comments. And if you believe justice matters, subscribe to the channel and give me a like. It helps more people hear stories like this one. Inside the precinct. Time dragged like punishment. Elena sat in a metal chair, wrists still red and raw. The officers joked nearby, laughing about cleaning the streets. Every insult, every smirk, every minute. She memorized them all. 4 hours passed before anyone asked her name. When they finally did, she said it softly, Elena Vasquez. They wrote it down without looking up. The fluorescent lights hummed, dust floated in their glare. Behind her calm eyes, a strategy was forming, one that would change everything about this station, this city, and the men who thought they could humiliate her when she walked out. The afternoon sun stung her face, but her steps were steady. At the Westbridge Hotel, she stood in front of the bathroom mirror and unbuttoned her blazer. Purple bruises had bloomed across her shoulder and arms. She took photographs of each mark, methodical, clinical. Then she opened her laptop. A spreadsheet filled the screen. 180 complaints, 65% marked as resolved. Though she knew most had been buried, she scrolled down to one name, Sergeant Victor Lang. The same man who had waved from his cruiser, a man who'd built his pension on silence. Elena leaned against the counter, the mirror reflecting a face calm but burning inside. She had seen too many like him, men who turned cruelty into routine and called it service. She pressed her palms together, breathing slowly. This wasn't the first time she'd been on the receiving end of a badge misused. She remembered the day they took Miguel. Her brother had been 18, walking home from a youth game in East LA. The sun had been just as bright, the day just as ordinary. One officer had shouted, one had pulled a trigger, and her life had changed in the space of 7 seconds. That sound had never left her. Now, 24 years later, she had power they couldn't imagine, and the discipline to use it quietly. She wasn't here for revenge, she was here for reform. Every bruise was evidence, every insult was testimony, every delay in that booking room was another line in her report. She turned on the camera of her laptop and recorded a message, voice steady, words deliberate. Undercover operation, Riverside Heights, 7th Precinct. First contact, Harlan and Klein. Unlawful detainment confirmed, excessive force documented, Supervisor Lang complicit by omission. She paused, eyes hardening, proceeding as planned. Her phone rang again. "Commissioner Hayes." She answered this time. "Captain Vasquez," his voice said, low and concerned. "Are you all right?" She hesitated. "Physically. Yes. Professionally. You might want to sit down." Silence. Then a quiet sigh. "Understood." He said, "You know what to do." She closed the phone and sat in the stillness of her room, the light fading outside the window. On her desk were files from other precincts she had reformed. Photos, reports, before and after charts showing what transparency could do. None of those places had been easy, but none had felt like this. This one was personal. The next morning, she drove past Palm Grove again. The same officers patrolled the same spotless streets. She kept her distance. Windows rolled up. Camera running. Her bruises had darkened overnight, a visible reminder of what she was walking into. Inside her glove compartment were two things: her badge, locked in a leather case, and her brother's old dog tag. She ran her fingers over the engraved name. Miguel Vasquez, 1983 to 2001. She whispered, "I'll finish this for both of us." Back at the hotel, she compiled her evidence, each file labeled by time, date, and officer. She built a timeline: the stop, the arrest, the delay, the mockery. By the time the sun set, she had documented an entire culture of abuse in less than 24 hours. She sat back, exhausted but unwavering. She could still feel Harlan's hand on her shoulder, the weight of his authority used like a weapon. But the more she remembered, the steadier her pulse became. It wasn't fear, it was focus. Later that night, she opened her journal. The pages were filled with fragments, names, quotes, statistics, patterns. One line stood alone: "Power without accountability is violence." She underlined it twice. Outside, the city buzzed with its usual rhythm, unaware that change had already begun. She knew that soon. These men would learn who she was, but not yet. Not until the paperwork was filed. Not until the cameras were ready. Not until the world could see the truth for itself. Before turning off the lights, she looked once more at her reflection. The bruises were fading to dull blue. Her eyes were sharp, unbroken. "They think they silenced me," she whispered, "but they just handed me everything I need." Her phone buzzed one last time with a new message from an anonymous number. 2 words glowed on the screen: "Watch yourself." She smiled faintly, not from amusement, but certainty. She had walked into worse storms and come out stronger. She placed the phone face down, pulled the curtains halfway open, and watched the first trace of dawn edge over the skyline. "This is for you, Miguel," she said softly. Then she began to type the opening sentence of her first report. Elena Vasquez woke before sunrise. The bruises on her shoulder had turned the color of storm clouds, her wrists still lined with red from the cuffs. She didn't cover them. She wanted Hayes to see exactly what had happened. At 7 sharp. She walked into his office, blazer pressed, eyes steady. Hayes looked up from his desk, his jaw tightening as the light from the window hit the marks on her skin. "Good God. Elena," he said quietly. "Who did this?" She placed her report on his desk. "Your men." She answered. Her tone was calm, deliberate, every word carrying the weight of control. Mark Harlan and Derek Klein. Sergeant Victor Lang was on scene and ignored it. She watched his reaction, guilt mixed with resignation. "You told me to go in blind," she continued. "Well, now you've seen what blindness costs." He started to speak, but she lifted a hand. "Don't apologize. Use it." She turned to leave, sunlight spilling over her shoulder as she said, "It's time we make Riverside Heights see itself." That same light followed her through the glass corridors of City Hall. She moved quietly, methodically, carrying files under her arm that could unravel careers. Behind every number, every statistic, there was a name, people beaten, humiliated, or silenced by the same officers who called themselves protectors. As she crossed the marble lobby, she remembered the look on Harlan's face, mocking, confident, sure of impunity. That arrogance was built on years of protection from men like Lang. Not today, not anymore. Meanwhile, somewhere across town, Mark Harlan sat in a casino parking lot, his badge clipped to his belt, his mind heavy with debt. His daughter's latest hospital bill sat folded in his pocket. $50,000 he didn't have. The loan shark leaned against the hood of a car, lighting a cigarette. "End of the week," he said flatly. Harlan nodded, staring down at the asphalt. He didn't gamble for pleasure anymore. He gambled for survival. But the walls were closing in. He'd crossed too many lines. And the wrong woman now stood on the other side. At the same time, Derek Klein sat at his kitchen table, his wife's pregnancy glow shadowed by fear. "You promised me you'd quit," she whispered. He couldn't meet her eyes. "If they fire you..." "What happens to us?" she asked. He looked down at his hands, still raw from training. "I just do what I'm told." He muttered. "That's the problem." She replied. Her voice trembled, but it was the truth he couldn't bear to hear. Back at the precinct, Sergeant Lang polished his retirement plaque in the morning light. 28 years of looking the other way, neatly engraved in gold. He ran a hand over the polished wood and smiled faintly. "One more year," he whispered to himself, but deep down, he knew it was ending sooner than that. Elena spent the afternoon reviewing internal files from a private office near the Westbridge Hotel. The data was worse than she expected. 92 complaints had been erased, deleted from the public record as if the victims never existed. Some involved broken ribs, others unlawful searches. All shared the same pattern: excessive force, falsified reports, and Lang's signature buried in the approval column. She highlighted each one, labeling them red. When she finished, the screen glowed like a map of misconduct. She leaned back, exhaled slowly, and murmured, "You buried them, but I'll dig everyone back up," when she returned to her hotel that evening. The door was slightly ajar. Her instincts sharpened. She entered quietly. Drawers had been emptied, her laptop unplugged, files scattered across the carpet. Nothing stolen, just violated. On the mirror, someone had scrawled in red marker, "Back off." Spick. The word hit like a blade but didn't pierce. She stood for a long moment, calm, then reached for her phone. She traced the threat within an hour. An anonymous text pinged from Klein's precinct-issued tablet. Proof of intimidation. Another line for her file. Later that night, Harlan met his loan shark under the palm trees outside Palm Grove. The man smirked as he handed over a wad of cash. "You've got two options. Harlan, money or muscle. You pick which one you're good for." Harlan's jaw tightened. "I'm good for both," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. He looked up at the glittering sky, feeling smaller than he ever had. Somewhere in that same moment, Elena was parked across town, camera rolling as Harlan made an illegal stop in Southbridge. A young black man on a bicycle. No crime, no warrant. Harlan threw him against a wall and demanded ID. The man's groceries spilled onto the sidewalk. Elena stepped out of her car, phone in hand. "What's your reasonable suspicion?" "Officer?" she asked evenly. Harlan turned, recognition flickering for a moment. "Ma'am, step back." His voice cracked slightly. She didn't move. Then came another voice. "Sophia Ramirez, the rookie, standing a few feet away." "Sir?" "She's right," Sophia said, her tone firm but respectful. "There's no cause for detainment." Harlan glared at her, jaw tightening. "You want to keep your job? Ramirez, stay quiet." The tension hung in the air like heat. Elena's eyes met Sophia's. No words needed, just the shared understanding of who was right. "I'll see you soon," Elena said calmly, turning back to her car. Harlan watched her go, the weight of uncertainty settling in. He didn't know yet, but he'd just handed her everything she needed. That night, Sophia couldn't sleep. She replayed the scene over and over. The officer she was supposed to respect threatening an innocent woman, and that same woman's quiet defiance. Something about her seemed familiar, too controlled to be a bystander. Sophia opened her old folder, her father's whistleblower case, the one that got him pushed out. She'd joined the force to finish what he couldn't, and maybe, just maybe, the woman from Southbridge was here for the same reason. At the hotel, Elena uploaded her footage to a secured drive. The clip showed everything: Harlan's aggression, the racial profiling. The moment Sophia tried to intervene, it was airtight. She backed up every file twice, then placed her camera beside the computer. The city outside was glowing, alive, unaware that its darkest precinct was about to be exposed. She opened her notebook, wrote a single sentence, and underlined it. "They just handed me an airtight case." Then she closed it, leaned back in her chair, and smiled faintly. The hunt had officially begun. The next morning began with silence, the kind that presses against your chest before something breaks. Elena Vasquez sat in her car outside the precinct, watching officers come and go through tinted glass. She'd been invisible for a week, another face behind sunglasses, another woman parked on the wrong side of power. But every movement, every radio call, every smirk from Harlan or Klein told her what she already knew. Corruption wasn't hidden here. It was routine. At roll call, the fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Harlan stood near the back wall, deleting dash cam footage from the previous night, just cleaning memory space. He muttered to Klein. They laughed. The supervisor, Sergeant Lang, signed off without looking up. The blue wall held firm, thick with arrogance. What none of them saw was Sophia Ramirez, standing quietly in the corner, phone tucked into her vest pocket, recording every second, across town. Elena met Sophia for the first time off duty, in a sunlit park dotted with jacaranda trees. Sophia was nervous, her voice low but steady. "I've seen the reports vanish," she said. "Lang tells us the system glitched. But the names, those victims, they're gone." Elena listened carefully, the morning breeze shifting strands of hair across her face. "You're not imagining it," she said softly. "I've seen the deleted archives. 92 cases. You're the only one still questioning it." Sophia swallowed hard. "My father lost his badge for doing the same thing." Elena nodded. "Then you already understand what courage costs." They sat there a while in silence, the kind that binds two people who know danger is coming, but refuse to run. Later that afternoon, Elena left the park and drove onto the sun-glared 405 freeway. The sky was a piercing blue, traffic thin. She checked her mirrors, noticed the same silver Dodge Charger behind her for 6 exits. A sudden jolt, metal against metal. The Charger rammed her rear bumper. Her car swerved, tires screaming against asphalt. Another hit from the side sent her spinning toward the shoulder. The airbag exploded, filling her lungs with powder. She coughed, dazed but conscious, through the cracked glass. She saw the Charger speeding away, plates obscured with tape. Her training took over. She grabbed her phone, hit record, and documented everything. Skid marks, debris, timestamp, direction. She called emergency services but didn't mention her title when Highway Patrol arrived. She recognized the insignia on one of the responding cars, 7th Precinct, Lang's jurisdiction, at the hospital. She refused overnight care, mild concussion, shoulder strain. She'd live. What mattered was what she'd caught. 2 traffic cameras and 45 witnesses who'd pulled over. A nearby liquor store had a security feed showing the Charger waiting for her at the ramp. By nightfall, she had the footage saved and archived on 3 drives. Attempted assassination wasn't on the schedule, but she adapted fast. Whoever sent that car had just confirmed how deep the rot went back home. Harlan sat in silence, the news of her survival gnawing at his mind. His wife had stopped speaking to him. His daughter's medical treatments had stalled. The casino manager had called twice that day. "You either pay or we collect another way." Harlan's hands shook as he poured a drink. "She's not supposed to be alive," he muttered. Klein, sitting beside him, looked sick. "You told me it was just a scare," he said quietly. "You said it wouldn't go that far." Harlan glared. "You think this is a game? You saw what she did to Ramirez's dad. These reform types. They ruin careers, families. You take orders, or you end up like him." Klein didn't answer. He just stared at the floor, the weight of guilt tightening around his chest. At the same hour, Lang reviewed internal messages. One from the commissioner's office mentioned a formal announcement tomorrow, something about leadership changes. Lang frowned, uneasy. He'd heard whispers about an evaluation officer from the state, but nothing official. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the walls plastered with commendations. For 28 years, he had survived every reform wave. He wasn't about to drown in this one. He called Harlan, "Stay in line." He ordered, "No stunts, no attention." But the damage was done. Every order he'd given, every false report he'd signed, was already sitting in Elena's encrypted folder, waiting for dawn. The following morning, she returned to the precinct in a plain gray blazer. The officers barely looked at her as she passed through the main corridor. Sophia nodded discreetly from behind the reception desk. Elena moved to the evidence locker, confirming that several seized body cams had been swapped. She photographed each serial number and walked straight to Lang's office. "Morning, Sergeant," she said, her voice calm but sharp. Lang looked up, surprised. "Can I help you?" "You already have," she replied. She placed a sealed envelope on his desk. "Read it tonight," before he could ask. She left, the sunlight following her down the hallway like a silent witness. By noon, the station buzzed with tension. Harlan noticed officers whispering. "What's going on?" he asked. Klein shrugged nervously. "Something about a ceremony tomorrow. Command change." Harlan smirked. "They'll promote one of us. Lang's got it handled." But even he didn't sound convinced. That evening, Harlan's wife found the casino bills. She stood in their dimly lit kitchen, voice breaking. "You're gambling our daughter's treatment?" He tried to speak, but the words died in his throat. "You swore you'd stop," she shouted. "You said you were done with lies." He slammed his hand against the table. "I'm doing what I have to do to keep this family alive." The silence that followed was worse than her tears. She took the bills, folded them, and said, "Maybe she's better off without you." Then she walked away. Meanwhile, Klein sat in a bar at noon, nursing his 3rd drink. The bartender turned up the TV. A news ticker crawled across the screen. Riverside Heights Police Department under federal review. Ceremony scheduled tomorrow. Klein felt the room tilt. He knew it was over. He pulled out his phone, typed a message to Sophia. "You were right." Then he deleted it before sending. Back at the station, Lang gathered 5 officers in the briefing room. "You've all heard rumors," he said, forcing calm into his voice. "Don't believe them. Tomorrow's ceremony is routine. Nothing changes." The men nodded, but their eyes betrayed doubt. Elena watched through the glass window, unseen, memorizing every face, the same faces that laughed when she was handcuffed in the sun. Tomorrow, they would know exactly who she was. That night, Hayes called. "Everything ready?" he asked. "Yes," Elena said, All evidence uploaded, every file cross-checked. His voice lowered. You sure you're ready for the storm? She smiled faintly. I've lived in it my whole life. She closed her laptop and stared out at the city lights. Each glow in the distance marked another life touched by this department's failure. Tomorrow, those lights would witness the reckoning. She thought of Harlan's fury, Klein's fear, Lang's greed, Sophia's courage, and her brother Miguel, whose memory had guided every step. Ceremony in 24 hours. Hayes had said. Elena whispered the words to herself like a promise, then let the truth come out. The morning sun poured through the high windows of the Riverside Heights 7th Precinct, cutting clean streaks of gold across the polished floor. The air smelled of starch, fresh coffee, and nerves. 120 officers stood in formation, uniforms crisp, badges gleaming. Murmurs rippled quietly through the ranks. Everyone knew the commissioner was coming, and that something big was about to happen. At the back of the room, Harlan leaned toward Klein and whispered, She won't file a damn thing. Lang's got it buried. Klein nodded absently, but his jaw was tight. His sleepless night showed in his eyes. In the front row, Sergeant Lang adjusted his tie, forcing a smile as he wiped his palms on his trousers. His pension papers sat locked in his desk. 30 years of silence, about to cash out. He told himself he'd done enough to survive, but survival was no longer in his control. The doors opened at 9 sharp. Commissioner Hayes walked in, flanked by 2 aides. His face was expressionless, his step slow and deliberate. Good morning. Officers, he began, his voice echoing across the briefing hall. Today marks the end of an era, and the beginning of accountability. Harlan smirked, leaning to Klein again. He's talking about cutting overtime. He whispered. Hayes continued. As of this morning, the command transition for the 7th Precinct is official. He paused. Your new commanding officer, Captain Elena Vasquez. For a breath. No one moved. The room froze. Then the double doors opened once more, and Elena stepped in. Full dress uniform, 4 gold bars gleaming under the morning sun. The same woman Harlan had thrown against a car, cuffed, and mocked a week earlier. The sound of her heels echoed like a verdict. Every face turned toward her, the truth landing in waves of disbelief. Klein's lips parted. Lang's smile collapsed. Harlan's face went pale. She stopped at the center of the room, posture straight, gaze calm. The sunlight caught the edge of her police academy ring, the one Harlan had sneered at as he pinned her to the hood. She waited for the murmurs to fade, then spoke. Good morning, she said evenly. Some of you already met me, though not by name. My title is Captain Elena Vasquez, and as of today, I am your commanding officer. Silence stretched. She looked directly at Harlan. Let me be clear, this is not a punishment. This is a turning point. She stepped forward, holding up a folder thick with evidence. What you see here is a record of 1 week inside this building, 4 illegal stops, 3 falsified reports, and 1 attempted assassination. Gasps rippled through the ranks. She continued. Some of you think the badge protects you from accountability. It does not. The badge is a duty, and duty requires truth. She nodded toward the projection screen behind her. Instantly, footage appeared. Harlan's stop in Southbridge, the illegal detainment, the threat. The camera caught his words, sharp and arrogant. You don't belong here. Now those words played across the room, echoing like an accusation. Klein covered his mouth, shame flooding his face. Lang looked ready to faint. Harlan stood rigid, fists clenching, jaw locked. Elena turned back to the crowd. Some of you have forgotten who you serve, she said quietly. Not your supervisors, not your pensions. You serve the public, every one of them. Commissioner Hayes stepped forward. These findings were reviewed by my office. He said, Effective immediately. Sergeant Victor Lang is relieved of supervisory duty pending investigation. Officers Mark Harlan and Derek Klein are placed on administrative leave until further notice. Harlan's face twisted. This is a setup, he snapped. She's making this up. She's lying. Elena didn't blink. Would you like to deny it under oath? She asked. Because your deleted dashcam footage is already restored. Harlan lunged forward, eyes wild, but before he could reach her, Sofia Ramirez stepped out from the sideline and caught his arm, twisting it into a control hold. Don't, she said sharply. Not again. The room erupted in shouts, some backing away, others frozen in disbelief. Elena stood unmoved. Hayes raised his hand, and the officers fell silent again. That's enough, he said firmly. You're done embarrassing this department. Harlan breathed hard. Trapped between rage and ruin, Klein stood trembling beside him, whispering, Mark, stop. Harlan turned his glare toward Klein, betrayal flashing across his face. You gonna turn on me too? He spat. Klein didn't answer. His silence was answer enough. Elena opened a small folder and laid it on the podium. Inside this envelope, she said, are 92 erased complaints, all re-entered into the federal database, each with names, dates, and signed statements. Every falsified report now carries your initials. Sergeant Lang. Lang's head dropped. The weight of it pressed his shoulders low. You think this place is rotten? He murmured, almost to himself. You have no idea what you've started. She met his eyes. I didn't start it. She said, you did. When you stopped believing that right and wrong mattered. Hayes turned toward her. Captain Vasquez, he said. You have full authority to proceed. She nodded. Then let's begin. She called out the names. Harlan, Klein, Lang, Ramirez. They stepped forward. The room's tension was thick enough to hold. She placed photos on the table, bruises on her wrist, images from the illegal stop, the text message telling her to watch yourself, and the casino footage tying Harlan to a known loan shark. Gasps rippled again. Integrity, she said slowly, isn't what you do when cameras are rolling. It's what you do when no one's watching. She turned to Sofia. Officer Ramirez, step forward. Sofia hesitated, unsure. Elena smiled slightly. You stopped a crime in progress when you defended a citizen's rights. You upheld your oath when it mattered, effective immediately. You are promoted to senior officer, pending field leadership training. Sofia blinked, stunned. The room erupted in quiet murmurs, some in support, others in resentment. Then Elena turned to Harlan one last time. You had every opportunity to change course, she said softly. You chose arrogance over honor. You will answer for it. Harlan straightened, voice shaking with anger. You think you can walk in here and fix everything? You're just another political stunt. You'll burn out like the rest. She looked at him without blinking. Maybe. She said, but the truth will still stand when I'm gone. Commissioner Hayes signaled to internal affairs officers waiting by the door. Escort them out. Harlan jerked his arm free and glared at Elena one last time. You don't scare me, he hissed. She stepped closer, her voice low. You should be scared of the mirror. Not me. As they led him out. The room remained silent. Elena turned to the remaining officers. If you wore that badge for the right reasons, she said, her voice steady but not cold, I need you. But if you're here to protect yourself, your time's over. The sunlight caught her uniform again as she stepped back, the golden bars on her shoulders shining like a reflection of everything she'd endured to get here, around her. Whispers turned to quiet respect. The station that had humiliated her now stood at attention. Change, long overdue, had arrived under a morning sky too bright to ignore. Outside, as the doors closed behind her, she exhaled slowly. The city felt lighter. Hayes joined her on the steps, his tone quieter now. "You just set a fire in there," he said. She looked at him, eyes clear. "No," she replied. "I just opened the blinds." The morning of the public hearing began with a quiet hum in the air, the kind of tension that builds before a storm. Sunlight flooded through the glass dome of the City Hall chamber, bouncing off polished microphones and the seal of Riverside Heights mounted behind the dais. 200 people filled the seats, residents from Southbridge, reporters from every major outlet, and a half-circle of city officials waiting for answers. At the center of it all sat Captain Elena Vasquez, her uniform pressed, posture unyielding. The bruises were gone, but the memory of them remained in every word she had prepared. Beside her, Commissioner Hayes flipped through documents, his expression unreadable. To his left sat the accused, Mark Harlan, Derek Klein, and Victor Lang, each separated by a uniformed bailiff, their names whispered through the crowd like stains that couldn't be washed away. When the gavel struck, silence followed. "This hearing will come to order," the moderator announced. "We are here to examine allegations of misconduct, obstruction, and abuse of authority within the 7th Precinct." He nodded to Elena. "Captain Vasquez, you may begin." She rose slowly, letting the light from the high windows fall across her face. "For too long," she began, her voice calm but resonant. "This city has measured law enforcement by numbers, arrests, tickets, clearance rates, while ignoring what truly defines justice, integrity." She opened a binder thick with evidence. Over the past 6 months, 180 complaints were filed against this precinct. 65% were labeled resolved. They weren't. They were erased. The first image appeared on the large screen behind her, body cam footage of Harlan slamming a civilian against a wall, then another of Klein handcuffing a teenager without cause. Gasps filled the room. Lang shifted uncomfortably, jaw tightening. Harlan stared forward, his fists clenched. Elena turned the page. "These actions aren't isolated incidents," she continued. "They represent a culture, a belief that the badge shields men from consequence. Today, that ends." She clicked to the next slide. Surveillance footage of Harlan meeting his loan shark under palm trees. Time-stamped and verified. "Officer Mark Harlan," she said evenly, "used his authority to cover up debts connected to a criminal gambling ring when confronted. He orchestrated an attempted assault on a federal reform officer." "Me," the audience murmured, outrage spreading like fire through dry grass. Harlan stood abruptly, voice booming. "You think you can destroy a man's life because you don't like how he polices? You don't know what it's like. My kid's fighting cancer. I did what I had to do." His voice cracked, but the anger masked his guilt. Elena's tone softened just slightly. "And what about the children you terrorized? The families you broke? The trust you shattered? Pain doesn't justify cruelty." "Officer," the moderator banged the gavel, "you will sit down or you'll be removed." Harlan sat, chest heaving. "Next." Elena turned to Klein. "Officer Derek Klein," she said. "You falsified 3 reports under Sergeant Lang's supervision, but you came forward." She gestured toward him. "Would you like to tell them why?" Klein hesitated, eyes glassy. "Because it was wrong," he said quietly. "Because we crossed lines we weren't supposed to. And because she," he pointed toward Elena, "wasn't supposed to survive that car crash." The room fell dead silent. Klein's words hung heavy in the air. The moderator leaned forward. "Are you admitting knowledge of an attempted murder?" Klein nodded, tears welling. "I didn't stop it. That's just as bad." Lang slammed his hand on the table. "You don't know what you're saying. Son, you'll destroy your own life." Klein looked at him, voice trembling but steady. You destroyed it for me when you told me silence was loyalty." Elena watched the exchange quietly. Justice was finally speaking for itself. She continued, presenting witness lists, photographs, and body cam files, 65 videos in total, each time stamped, cross-referenced, undeniable. Then came the statements, 38 witnesses, from civilians to former officers. The evidence spoke in clear, unrelenting rhythm. Each click of the remote tightened the walls around the accused. By midday, the sunlight had shifted, casting long beams across the chamber floor. The moderator cleared his throat. "We will now move to deliberation." But before the panel could speak, Harlan slammed his fist onto the table again. "You're all hypocrites," he shouted. "We keep the streets safe while you sit in your offices pretending to care. None of you know what it's like out there." His words ricocheted off marble walls, desperate and wild. Elena stood calmly. "Safety without justice is tyranny," she said softly. "And what you call control, we call abuse." The panel conferred for 10 tense minutes before the verdict was read. Based on the evidence presented, Officer Mark Harlan is hereby terminated from service and referred for criminal prosecution on charges of assault, conspiracy, and obstruction. Officer Derek Klein is terminated with eligibility for rehabilitation cooperation under judicial review. Sergeant Victor Lang is to be relieved of duty and referred to the District Attorney's Office for criminal misconduct and destruction of evidence. The gavel struck again, final and firm. Harlan's face collapsed into disbelief. "You can't do this!" he shouted, lunging toward the table. Two deputies restrained him as he struggled. "You don't get to take everything from me." His voice cracked under the weight of his own downfall. Elena met his eyes. "You took it from yourself," she said. He froze, then looked away, defeated. Outside the chamber, cameras flashed as reporters rushed for statements. Elena walked past them without a word, Hayes by her side. "It's done," he said quietly. She shook her head. "Not yet. It's never done. It's only the beginning." That evening, the consequences rippled outward like aftershocks. Harlan returned home to find an empty house. His wife's car was gone, and on the kitchen table lay the hospital bills and a single note. "I hope you find the man you used to be." He sank into a chair, the sound of his daughter's laughter echoing faintly from an old recording on his phone. He pressed play, and for the first time in years, he wept across town. Derek Klein sat in a treatment center, trembling as he signed his rehab forms. His pregnant wife stood beside him, silent but present. "I'll try to fix it," he whispered. She nodded slowly. "Start by fixing yourself." He lowered his head, shame heavy but cleansing. As for Victor Lang, he walked into his office under the glow of the same fluorescent lights he'd ignored for decades. His nameplate glimmered in the stillness. He packed his belongings quietly. Photos, plaques, the tarnished retirement plaque he'd polished so often. He stopped at the window, watching the afternoon sun spill over the city he'd helped fracture. 30 years, he whispered. For what? His reflection didn't answer. When the call came from the commissioner's office, he didn't pick up. He just left the badge on his desk and walked out into the light, carrying nothing, back at headquarters. Elena stood before the precinct's flag, lowering it slightly before re-raising it again. The crowd outside cheered. For the first time, the 7th precinct wasn't feared. It was being rebuilt. As the sun dipped below the horizon, she stood alone on the steps, breathing in the cool air, knowing this wasn't closure, it was reckoning, and as the city lights flickered on across Riverside Heights, she whispered to herself, justice doesn't end with a verdict. It begins with one, 6 months later. Riverside Heights looked almost unrecognizable. The chaos had given way to slow, steady renewal. The 7th precinct, once a symbol of abuse and corruption, was now the city's most watched experiment in reform. Complaint numbers had dropped by 92%, and community participation had risen by nearly 70%. Coffee shops that used to close at dusk were now open late. Patrol officers shook hands with residents instead of pointing flashlights into their faces. On weekends, Captain Elena Vasquez could be found in uniform, standing under white tents at Coffee with Cops events, answering questions from citizens who once feared her badge. The morning sun always hit her face the same way, clean, unwavering, alive. She didn't talk much about the past, but everyone could see it in her composure. The precinct was healing, but the scars were still visible. Sofia Ramirez had become the heart of the new department. She ran community programs, mentored cadets, and often reminded rookies why they wore the uniform. "You can't fix trust from behind a desk," she told them. "You fix it on the street." The program grew fast. Over 400 residents attended the last event, some even hugging officers they once distrusted. Elena watched from a few steps back, proud but cautious. Reform was fragile. It could be shattered with one bullet, one bad decision, one flash of arrogance, and that morning, beneath the warmth of the California sun, danger was closer than anyone realized. Harlan had been released on bond pending trial. He wore a suit to court, pretended remorse, and spoke softly about redemption, but outside the courtroom. He was venom and rage. His wife had divorced him, taken their daughter to live with relatives in Oregon. His name was on every local broadcast, every headline, every cautionary tale. He spent his days pacing his apartment, his nights drinking, his mind burning with the thought that Elena Vasquez had destroyed him. When a stranger in a black leather jacket knocked on his door and offered a chance to finish what was started, Harlan didn't ask questions. He just handed over an envelope of cash. The plan was simple: make it look random. The upcoming community fair at Southbridge Park drew hundreds. Elena would be there, unguarded, approachable. The hitman only needed one clear shot. "Accidents happen," the man said with a grin. Harlan nodded, staring out the window at the fading light. "Just make sure it looks clean," he murmured. "She took everything from me. I just want her gone." On the day of the fair, the park overflowed with families, music, and laughter. Children played on inflatable slides while officers handed out snow cones and balloons. Elena stood near the main stage, dressed casually in a cream blouse and light jacket. Her presence was quiet, but magnetic. People came to thank her for changing their city, for making them feel safe again. She smiled, but her eyes were always scanning, reading the space, the corners, the faces. Years of training never left her. She spotted Sofia walking toward her, holding 2 cups of coffee. "They love you here," Sofia said with a grin. "I just try to keep the lights on," Elena replied. Then the air shifted. It was subtle at first, a flicker of movement near the vendor row, a glint of metal in the sun. Sofia saw it too. "Gun!" she shouted, before anyone could react. She moved faster than thought, drawing her sidearm and diving toward Elena. A single shot cracked through the morning. Screams filled the air. The shooter stumbled as Sofia returned fire. 2 controlled rounds. The man fell instantly. Elena hit the ground, ears ringing, the smell of gunpowder thick around her. When she looked up, Sofia was kneeling beside her, breathing hard, her hand trembling slightly. "You okay, Captain?" she asked. Elena's voice was steady. "You just saved my life." Officers rushed in, securing the area, ushering civilians to safety. The hitman's weapon was recovered, a silenced pistol with filed serial numbers. His phone buzzed in his pocket. On the screen was one text: "Done within hours." Detectives traced the message back to an encrypted prepaid device found in Harlan's apartment. When they entered, Harlan was already gone, but they found the envelope, half full of cash, and a note that read, She ruined me. Now she'll know what that feels like. By evening, the city was in shock. News outlets broadcast the footage of Sophia's bravery on repeat. The entire country saw her dive into danger without hesitation. Presidentially recognized within days, she became a local hero. When asked about her actions, she simply said, "She gave me courage when I had none. I just gave it back." Elena sat in the hospital that night, stitches on her temple. A thin line of blood dried near her hairline. Hayes arrived just before midnight, his face drawn. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded. He tried to finish it. Hayes exhaled heavily. "Harlan's been rearrested. Federal charges this time. Conspiracy. Attempted murder. He's not walking away again." She looked toward the window, where the lights of the city shimmered. "He already lost," she said softly. "He just hasn't realized it yet." A week later, Klein appeared at the precinct. He looked thinner, sober, wearing a plain shirt instead of a uniform. "I wanted to see you," he said quietly. "I'm testifying against Lang. I owe you that much." She studied him for a moment. His face was older than his years, worn by guilt and fragile hope. "Do it for yourself," she said gently. "Not for me." He nodded. "I'm trying." In court, his testimony sealed the case. Lang, desperate and cornered, tried to sue the city for wrongful termination, claiming political retaliation, but the documents Elena had uncovered, the falsified signatures, the erased complaints, were undeniable. The judge dismissed his case with prejudice. Lang's pension was revoked, his final plea rejected. He left the courthouse without a word, shoulders slumped, eyes hollow. When the verdicts came down, the city breathed again. Harlan was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison, stripped of his badge, his benefits, and his dignity. Klein entered a rehabilitation program for officers seeking reinstatement through reform service. Lang disappeared from public life entirely. The department was purged, rebuilt from the ground up. In the following months, Riverside Heights became a case study in what accountability could achieve. Citizens volunteered at precinct events. Students interned with community policing teams. Sophia was promoted again, now leading the outreach division. She often stopped by Elena's office at dawn, bringing her coffee and teasing. "You ever gonna take a day off, Captain?" Elena would smile faintly. "When the work's done," she'd answer, and both knew it never really would be. One late afternoon, as sunlight spilled through the precinct's wide skylight, Elena walked past the wall of framed photographs, fallen officers, old commanders, community events. A new photo had just been added, Sophia shaking hands with a group of children at the fair, her badge gleaming. Underneath it read, "To serve, not to rule." Elena paused, her reflection mingling with the glass. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to exhale fully. The city outside was still imperfect, still human, but it was moving toward light. She stepped into her office, the sound of laughter echoing from the lobby, and whispered to the empty air, "We're not done, Miguel." But we're getting closer. A year had passed, and the 7th Precinct no longer looked like a fortress of fear. Morning sunlight poured through new glass panels, lighting up the walls where photographs of community events replaced old plaques of hollow awards. Riverside Heights had changed. The transformation wasn't sudden. It was built brick by brick, conversation by conversation, truth by truth. The same city that once whispered about corruption now spoke proudly about reform. And every morning, Captain Elena Vasquez walked through the doors in full uniform, nodding to officers who stood taller, prouder, cleaner. The air felt lighter. The people trusted again. Outside in Palm Grove, children rode bikes down quiet streets, and residents waved when patrol cars passed. a year ago. This same neighborhood had looked at police like enemies. Now, after 100 town halls and thousands of hours of transparency, they looked at them as partners. The morning sun bathed everything in gold, the symbol of what Elena always said justice should be: bright, honest, and visible. The final reckoning had come slowly but decisively. Mark Harlan was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. He didn't fight it. During his final hearing, he simply said, "I made myself a monster trying to protect what I loved." His daughter never visited. His wife remarried. The man who once believed he owned fear now lived under it, in a cell where sunlight reached only for a moment each day. Derek Klein completed rehabilitation, sober and haunted but determined to make peace with what remained of his life. He worked mall security in the city's North End, an honest job, quiet, routine. Some nights, when closing early, he stopped by community meetings just to listen. He didn't speak, but Elena knew he was there. Victor Lang, the old sergeant who had once ruled the precinct through silence, didn't live to see the second year of reform. Alone in a small apartment, he ended his life, leaving behind a single note: "Forgive me for teaching others that silence was survival." When Elena heard the news, she didn't rejoice. She closed her office door and sat in stillness. Some victories were too heavy to celebrate. The precinct, reborn under her leadership, became a national model. 12 precincts across California adopted her blueprint of community accountability: public dashboards, independent audit panels, and direct citizen reporting. Federal grants poured in. A $2.5 million reform budget funded new training programs and scholarships for young recruits from underrepresented communities. Reporters called it the Vasquez model. But to her, it wasn't about her name. It was about what her brother Miguel would have wanted: a system where no mother would bury her son because of arrogance in a badge. One afternoon, she stood in the precinct's atrium, sunlight pouring through the skylight. Around her, young officers were preparing for a youth mentorship event. Laughter filled the hall, something unheard of a year before. Sofia Ramirez walked up beside her, a confident leader now, her badge newly engraved with the title Lieutenant. "Hard to believe, isn't it?" Sofia said softly. "A year ago, I was scared to even speak up. Now, kids ask me how to become an officer." Elena smiled faintly. "That's the difference between fear and faith. You chose the second one." Sofia glanced at the framed photo hanging nearby. Elena and the entire precinct standing in front of the station, arms linked, eyes forward. "You think we're done?" she asked. Elena shook her head. "Justice isn't a finish line. It's maintenance. Every day we either protect it or we lose it." Her tone was calm, but the conviction underneath it was solid as stone. Later that evening, after the last of the cadets had gone home, Elena walked through the quiet corridors, pausing by the memorial wall. At the center hung a small framed photo of a young man smiling in a baseball cap: Miguel Vasquez, 18 years old. She touched the frame lightly. "You'd laugh if you saw this place now," she whispered. "It finally looks like the world you dreamed about." For a long moment, she stood there, letting the quiet speak for him. When she stepped outside, the city was alive with twilight. The streetlights flickered on, warm and steady. The people of Riverside Heights were not perfect, but they were finally seen, finally heard. As she walked toward her car, a group of children waved from the sidewalk. "Good night, Captain," one of them called out. She smiled and raised her hand in return. Back at her desk later that night, she finished her final report for the year. It was precise, factual, and calm, ending with a single sentence she had written months earlier but saved for last. She read it aloud softly before signing her name. "Justice isn't vengeance, it's transformation." The words lingered in the quiet office as the clock ticked past midnight. Outside. The city hummed with quiet peace. Elena closed the file, leaned back in her chair, and watched the faint glow of dawn rising again. The promise that light, once found, must be protected every single day. Thank you for watching this story. If you believe in justice, truth, and accountability, please subscribe, leave a like, and share this video so more people can hear stories that matter. Your support keeps these voices alive, and every click helps shine a little more light where darkness once ruled.